The congressman's picnic basket tips over when the first cannonball screams overhead, spilling fried chicken and champagne bottles across the hillside where Washington society has gathered to watch the Union Army crush the rebellion. Ladies in hoop skirts shriek and stumble backward, parasols forgotten, as the artillery round impacts 200 yards away in a cloud of dirt and smoke that smells nothing like the romantic war they imagined. This is Manassas Junction, Virginia, July 21, 1861, and 3 months into a war everyone promised would end by summer, the picnickers are about to discover that battles do not resemble parades. By sunset, these spectators will be fleeing in panicked chaos alongside routed soldiers, and America will learn that this war will not be short, will not be easy, and will not be anything like what anyone expected. The road from Washington to Manassas stretches 25 miles through rolling Virginia countryside, and on the morning of July 21st, it carries not just 35,000 Union soldiers, but dozens of civilians who have ridden out to witness history. Congressmen bring their families, newspaper reporters position themselves on strategic hilltops. Women spread blankets and unpack elaborate lunches, opera glasses ready to observe the battle they had been promised would be brief and decisive. The mood feels festive, celebratory, as if attending a sporting event rather than witnessing men attempting to end each other's lives. This carnival atmosphere reflects the profound naivety gripping both North and South in the summer of 1861. The war is 12 weeks old, born from decades of tension over slavery, states' rights, and irreconcilable visions of America's future. When Fort Sumter fell in April after Confederate artillery bombardment, President Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. They enlisted enthusiastically, convinced they would march south, win a single decisive battle, and return home as heroes before autumn harvest. Nobody understands yet what industrial-age warfare means. The weapons have evolved: rifled muskets accurate to 300 yards, artillery capable of firing explosive shells. But tactics remain Napoleonic, formations designed for smoothbore muskets effective only at 50 yards. Officers on both sides studied the same textbooks at West Point, learning strategies that are already obsolete, though nobody realizes it yet. The coming battle will be taught by men who have never commanded large forces in combat, executed by soldiers who enlisted weeks ago and barely know how to load their weapons properly. General Irvin McDowell commands the Union force, a staff officer with no battlefield experience, suddenly responsible for the largest American army assembled since the Mexican War. He protests to Lincoln that his troops are not ready, that 3 months of training cannot transform civilians into soldiers, that rushing into battle risks disaster. Lincoln's response is direct: "You are green, it is true, but they are green also." The logic seems sound. Both armies are equally unprepared, so superior Union numbers should prevail. McDowell's plan is actually quite sophisticated for an inexperienced commander: a flanking movement around the Confederate left, while a diversionary attack fixes their attention elsewhere. The Confederate force under General Pierre Beauregard occupies defensive positions along Bull Run Creek, a modest stream that becomes a significant obstacle where it cuts through steep banks. Beauregard has roughly 20,000 men, fewer than McDowell, but they hold strong terrain and fight to defend their home territory. The battle begins at dawn with Union artillery opening fire, the sound carrying clearly to the picnickers still setting up their viewing positions miles away. McDowell's flanking column marches through thick woods and across fields, taking longer than planned because nobody has accurate maps and green troops move slowly. The diversionary attack at Stone Bridge accomplishes its purpose. Confederate attention focuses there, while the main Union force approaches from an unexpected direction. For several hours, everything proceeds according to plan. Around mid-morning, Union forces strike the Confederate left flank near Matthews Hill. Confederate brigades, caught by surprise, begin falling back under heavy pressure. The Union soldiers, many seeing combat for the first time, discover they can do this, can advance under fire, can drive the enemy backward. Officers shout encouragement, color bearers wave flags forward, the line pushes ahead, stepping over wounded men and abandoned equipment, tasting what feels like victory. The picnickers watch through opera glasses and cheer as Union troops advance across the fields below. Some recognize regimental flags, calling out to friends and relatives they know are fighting down there. Smoke drifts across the battlefield in thick clouds, occasionally obscuring the action, then clearing to reveal new positions. Nobody on the hillside comprehends the chaos inside that smoke, the deafening noise, the confusion, the terror of men who realize bullets are actually trying to strike them. The Confederate line bends but does not break, falling back to Henry House Hill, where General Thomas Jackson's Virginia Brigade establishes position. Jackson, a former VMI professor known for eccentric habits and intense religious faith, arranges his men along the military crest of the hill, slightly below the topographical crest, where they can fire downward at approaching enemies while remaining partially protected. When Confederate General Barnard B. sees Jackson's steady line, he shouts to his own retreating troops, "There's Jackson standing like a stone wall, rally behind the Virginians." The nickname sticks, Stonewall Jackson, and the stand at Henry House Hill becomes the battle's turning point. Union forces, confident after their morning success, attack uphill against Jackson's positioned troops. The advance that seemed unstoppable hours ago now grinds to a halt as Confederate fire tears into Union ranks. Men fall in clusters, officers go down trying to rally their troops, momentum bleeds away into confusion and hesitation. The battle degenerates into a brutal close-range firefight around the Henry House, where 85-year-old widow Judith Henry refuses to evacuate and perishes when artillery fire destroys her home. Units on both sides lose cohesion, mixing together in the smoke and chaos. Soldiers fire at shapes in the haze, sometimes hitting their own men because nobody can identify uniforms through the powder smoke. Artillery batteries advance dangerously close to enemy lines, then get captured when supporting infantry retreats. Wounded men crawl towards the rear, while others stand frozen, unable to process the nightmare unfolding around them. Confederate reinforcements begin arriving by railroad, the first time in military history that rail transportation proves decisive in battle. General Joseph Johnston's army, which Union planners thought was pinned down in the Shenandoah Valley, has slipped away and rushed to Manassas. Fresh Confederate brigades feed into the battle throughout the afternoon, always arriving at critical moments, always tilting the balance when Union forces seemed ready to break through. McDowell's numerical advantage evaporates as exhausted Union troops face fresh opponents. By late afternoon, the Union Army has been fighting for nearly 10 hours. Soldiers are exhausted, ammunition runs low, and nobody knows where their regiment is supposed to be. When Confederate forces launch a counterattack around 4 p.m., accompanied by the high-pitched yell that will become the rebel yell, something breaks in the Union psyche. A few units retreat in good order, others simply dissolve, men dropping weapons and running for the rear, the retreat feeding on itself as panic spreads through the ranks. The Union withdrawal rapidly becomes a rout. Soldiers throw away rifles, canteens, anything slowing their flight. Artillery crews abandon their guns rather than take time to limber them properly. The road back to Washington, clogged with supply wagons and civilian carriages, transforms into a chaotic mass of fleeing soldiers and terrified spectators. Congressmen and their wives find themselves swept up in the panicked mob, their abandoned picnic baskets trampled by retreating troops. Confederate pursuit is limited. Their army is almost as disorganized by victory as the Union is by defeat. But the psychological impact is devastating. The soldiers who marched out confidently that morning, certain they would crush the rebellion in a single afternoon, now stumble back to Washington in darkness and rain, having discovered that war involves terror and chaos, and watching men die in ways no training prepared them for. The casualties shock both sides, nearly 5,000 combined, 900 dead, thousands wounded or missing.
These numbers seem catastrophic in July 1861, impossible to comprehend. Nobody realizes yet that this battle, which feels so enormous, is merely a preliminary skirmish compared to what is coming. In 3 years, single battles will produce casualties exceeding 50,000. Washington erupts in panic as defeated soldiers stream into the city throughout the night, spreading wild rumors about Confederate armies following close behind. Lincoln stays awake receiving reports, his hopes for a short war collapsing with each messenger bringing news of the disaster. In the South, celebration over the victory at Manassas, as Confederates named the battle, reinforces dangerous overconfidence that one Southerner can whip 10 Yankees, that Northern resolve will crumble after a few defeats. Both conclusions are wrong, but both will shape the war that follows. The North learns that defeating the rebellion requires far more than 3-month volunteers and one decisive.
Lincoln calls for 500,000 troops, enlisting for 3 years, begins organizing a real military structure, and appoints George McClellan to rebuild the shattered army. The war everyone thought would end by summer will drag on for 4 more years, consuming 600,000 lives. The battlefield at Manassas becomes a tourist site almost immediately, visitors walking the ground where the Union Army broke, collecting spent bullets and uniform buttons as souvenirs. The Henry House, where the widow died and the battle turned, stands as a shell, its walls pockmarked by artillery. Bull Run Creek flows placidly, giving no indication that men fought and died along its banks over questions that will take 4 years and unimaginable sacrifice to answer. The First Battle of Bull Run teaches America that wars are not won in single battles, that enthusiasm cannot substitute for training, that modern weapons make battlefield death far more efficient than anyone imagined. The picnickers who came to watch a spectacle instead witnessed the birth of a nightmare. A civil war that will tear the nation apart, will reshape American society, will determine whether the country survives at all. The fried chicken and champagne left abandoned on the hillside as they fled represents the innocence America lost that July afternoon, the naive belief that war could be glorious or brief or anything other than horror. Standing on Henry House Hill today, looking across fields now peaceful and green, it is almost impossible to imagine the chaos that unfolded here. The hillside where spectators spread their picnic blankets is marked with a plaque explaining their role in history. The house has been rebuilt. Bull Run still flows through the landscape, indifferent to the men who fought along its banks. But July 21, 1861, marks the moment when Americans on both sides learned that the war they started would not end quickly, would not end cleanly, and would cost far more than anyone imagined when the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. The battle was small by standards that would soon become normal, but it was the day war became real, the day the picnic ended forever.